is the live webinar page on the one that goes collaboration mistakes.
Do you want me to try and log in on that? Would that help?
Yeah, if you have a look at it, it's xraylisting.com/collaboration-mistakes/?live.
It should be what you sent me before, isn't it?
Yeah.
It should be the same link. Let me just find that, and I'll.
Well, hey, it's working.
Excellent.
We have a result. Ooh, so it's obviously on a some kind of system, time system. So, fingers crossed, there are a good few people watching, and I'm Judy Rees, and this is 3 collaboration mistakes bright people make. I'm actually very excited to do this. The nervous moments just to see whether the technology works or not is part of the excitement, I'm sure. With me is Ian Webster. We'll introduce ourselves in just a moment. I'm hoping that there's people from actually all over the world on this call. As I understand it from the sign-ups, we've got people like Hamish in New Zealand, where it's the absolute crack of dawn, Judy in Melbourne, we've got Owen in Spain, and a whole bunch of people across Europe, and Susan in Canada, I believe, where it's a bit more civilized time of day. I would be delighted to know for sure that you're definitely here. On the page where you can see the video playing out, there is a question box. It says, submit your question, we can answer it live on air. Well, I can't guarantee we can answer it live on air because there might be a lot of questions. But do please submit your questions and we'll do our best to answer them. Okay, so shall we get started in the official way? My name is Judy Rees. As you possibly know, I'm best known as the co-author of a book on clean language. But what excites me at the moment is collaboration and how human beings can collaborate more effectively to work together in teams, creative teams, teams that get stuff done, and in particular remote and virtual teams. In that process, I am using clean language, which, if you're interested, I'll talk more about later in the call. But in particular, what I'm doing is helping people to understand each other, to ask questions, to listen, to find out more about each other, to give effective feedback without fireworks, and to speak up about what they want. That's the kind of stuff I'm into and the kind of stuff I'm going to be sharing in this call. Before we go any further, though, let me invite my good friend Ian Webster to introduce himself. He's here to keep me on track, keep me organised, and to chip in with his ideas and suggestions as we go through the call. Ian, do introduce yourself.
Thanks, Judy. That's great. Okay, hi. I'm Ian Webster. I'm also based in London, just down the road from Judy. My background is very much, it's from a sort of business and a sort of corporate perspective. I've spent many years working in kind of consultancy and kind of project roles across a sort of variety of industries. Now, increasingly, I'm starting to explore this area of kind of collaboration skills with Judy. So I've been involved in one of Judy's courses that she's run already earlier this year, the summer school, looking at this area. And I have a similar interest, really, in terms of going into businesses and helping to sort of change the culture in workplaces and basically help the workplace become a better place, really. And like Judy, I'm very excited about the potential for this and the opportunities that collaboration skills I have, I think, to influence and to improve the workplace.
Thank you very much. And Susan in Canada has commented that yes, she's here, so we know that the question system is working. So that's brilliant. Thank you very much, Susan. Much appreciated. So let me explain a little bit about what I'm intending for this call. Excuse me, just keep looking over that there. That's where my notes are. So if I look away from the camera, it's to make sure I stay on track and cover the things I'm supposed to cover, because I want to make sure that in about an hour, I pack in as much value for you as I possibly can. I want to make sure that we get really high value for everybody who's listening to this call. So you go away with something you can use practically today if you're Susan in Canada, or tomorrow if you're listening in the UK. So we want to make sure you get as much as possible from the call. One thing I should explain is, I suppose, why I think I've got any qualification to talk about collaboration at all. Now, I'm not going to claim I'm an expert collaborator. I'm afraid I suspect it would take many lifetimes to become such a thing. What I can say is that I've done lots of collaborating in my time. As I say, I've co-authored a book, which is quite a deep form of collaboration, lasting weeks and months. I've also run a business with my co-author, again, a deep form of collaboration. I've done lots of short-term collaborations, different business projects in the last 3 or 4 years since I've been trading independently. Projects on which I've worked with different individuals on specific pieces of work in organisations. I've collaborated with my students, helping them to learn. But I suppose my biggest pieces of collaboration were back when I lived in my corporate existence, when I used to be a news journalist. Originally, I was a newspaper reporter for regional newspapers in the UK. And then later on, I was a media executive. I managed journalists. And if you think about it, I suppose creating a newspaper, or I better explain the big job I had. The last big job I had was I worked for teletext, which outside the UK you might not know what that was. It was a sort of prototype version of the internet, which exists on the television, on the old-fashioned analog television, and you press buttons on your remote control and you could get pages of information up. And people used to imagine that that service was created by gnomes or by magic or teams of elves. Nobody imagined that there were human beings creating that stuff, but there were actually a couple of hundred highly qualified journalists sitting in offices around the country and indeed around the world, creating those pages, and they would go up live in the moment, and often with the odd mistake, and you'd go in there and you'd change it right in front of people's very eyes, just as we can do nowadays with the internet, and you can change a page at the click of a button. We could do that on teletext. Now, creating an online newspaper, as that sort of thing was, or creating a newspaper, to me is sort of the ultimate collaboration. You've got hundreds of people collaborating on that. You've got the audience with their objective, which is just to get to the information, whether it's their football team results or the latest news or the weather report, as quickly as they possibly can. You've got the advertisers who want to get their information to people in such a way that the people will respond and buy their stuff. You've got the journalists who are, well, one of their objectives is to get the information to the people as quickly as possible. But of course they've got another goal, which is to earn their money, to get paid. They've got goals to develop their careers, so they want to get the best possible stories and the best possible prominence for their stories. You've got the editor, whose job it is to balance all the various stakeholders. And what he wants is to have the most successful newspaper he possibly can, with the highest circulation, and of course the best possible commercial success. Maybe he wants to win awards. And then you've got people like the printers who are printing the thing, if we're talking newspapers. You've got people like the van drivers who have to take it out to the newsagent shops. You've got the street sellers. In Birmingham we used to have scores of street sellers who would stand on the street corner and shout, "Email!" and selling this thing to people as they walk past. And all those people share an objective at one level, which is to get the paper out. But at another level, each of them has their own goal. And each of their goals is different. And to me, that's what typifies fabulous collaboration. You've got that blend of a shared goal and individual goals. Ian, am I making sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I used to be one of those people waiting for the football scores at the other end of the teletext service. I remember it very well, Judy. Yeah, I mean, for me, collaboration, if I was to use a metaphor, great collaboration is almost like being in a highly skilled jazz group. It's one of those things which, for me, is about being with other people, but in a kind of a real sort of sense of flow, really. Having almost being able to read and anticipate what the people around you are doing, and to actually create something together, to co-create kind of in the moment. And I think I use the jazz example because I think it's just something which we reach very infrequently, really. Normally, we have a lot of, particularly in the workplace environment, we have a lot of process and we have a lot of structure around us, and we're often following a set of rules. In that jazz situation, for me, it's just kind of like everyone's just contributing, improvising, and just kind of like creating something on the spot like that, which for me is the kind of ultimate, really, in collaboration.
Mm. Yes, I'd love to be able to make music. It's not something I've ever been able to do, but this last weekend I was in Sweden, and we were running a workshop, but the host is a guy called Ulf Sandstrom, who is a boogie-woogie musician. And that kind of boogie-woogie collaboration where you've not only got the musicians playing together, but you've also got the audience participating, the dance, the dancers participating, and even the people who can't dance are there clapping along or whatever. It's all part of the way beautiful collaboration works at its best.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, with the jazz example, it's not just about the creation. You have to be very mindful of your fellow musicians. I mean, there's nothing worse than a jazz band where the sax player goes off and does a 15-minute solo. You've got to kind of like you've got to be mindful of what's going on around you. So it's not just about the co-creation. It's about kind of like thinking a little bit about what's happening and being able to understand the people that you're actually creating the music with.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Co-creation is co-creation. It's not solo creation standing in the same room as other people.
No, it's a very different thing, and often what we see in the workplace is almost what you would call silo creation, really, which is people go off and in the cubicle world go off and do their jobs and come back to meetings and gather together and then go back to their cubicles. And you know, the art of co-creating and working together, I think, is to a certain extent a little bit of a lost one.
Mm. And yeah, we'll no doubt talk more about that as we go through, but I realise we haven't actually said what I'm actually intending for this call for you guys who are listening, which is probably something you want to know. What are you going to get out of listening to the rest of this conversation? Well, what I'm intending is that there will be absolute definite content that will help you improve your collaboration skills. So by the end of this call, you will have at least one thing that you can take away and use and get better at that. Now, obviously, there's a lot more to collaboration than we can squeeze into this short talk. So at the end of the call, I will be making an offer for what you can do if you would like to take this forward, and if you'd like to find out more about it, and if you'd like to learn more from me. I want to find people who absolutely share my excitement about this. It's not, for me, it's actually about collaborating on collaboration. It's finding the people who want to be part of this. It's not about me flogging something to people who don't want it, because I think there are plenty of people out there doing that, and we don't need another one. There's enough need for collaboration that I know there are enough people who will want what we've got here. So part of my outcome for this call is to find those people. This call will be being recorded. I assume the recording is going to work. Who knows? And hopefully it will reach even wider than the people we've got on the call tonight. So potentially there's an opportunity to increase the amount of collaboration in the world, maybe by a little, maybe by a lot. And if we can get there, if we can increase the amount of collaboration in the world, who knows what can happen? And there's a saying out there, I'm no idea where it came from, but none of us is as smart as all of us. That actually we can be more than the sum of our parts when we work together. I've seen that demonstrated over and over again in my own life, that when I can start to collaborate with people, something magical can start to happen. Now, if we can multiply that even a couple of times, hopefully many times over, then things are going to really start to change in our own lives and in the lives of our organisations, which is something that really matters to me. I'm realising I haven't said, do please ask questions as we go along. The questions system is supposed to magically flash up the questions in front of my very eyes as they come through, so I'm trusting that it's working. If you'd like to just give me a wave, I'd be very happy, because it makes me feel reassured to know that the system continues to work. It's one of those things about anything about the internet. You just start to worry that it will break down at some critical moment. So who knows, but fingers crossed it's going to work. So a couple of things I want to say before I get into the great meat of this stuff. I suppose I want to talk about how this webinar and my interest in collaboration came to be, how it came to be at the top of my list of things to do. I've been working reasonably successfully as a trainer and coach for the last few years, but over the last 12 months or so, this question of collaboration, and in particular remote collaboration, has really come to the top for me. It came about through my interest in clean language and through a colleague called Caitlin Walker. Now, Caitlin Walker is somebody who has been exploring clean language for longer than me. She knew the founder of Clean Language, David Grove, but it's taken until May of this year, May 2014, for her to get her book published. Now, I've actually got a number of copies of this book because I think it's so wonderful, and I keep giving it out to people when I meet them. But that's Caitlin's book, From Contempt to Curiosity, Creating the Conditions for Groups to Collaborate. And it's a very exciting book because some of the stories that are in there are deeply compelling. They're stories like the group of people at a small software organization who, they were like every software organization. There were techies and there were salespeople. And as far as possible, they would avoid talking to each other. The techies thought that the salespeople would sell unreasonable things. They would make promises that the techies could never keep. The salespeople thought the techies were unreasonable people. They could never deliver on time, and they would always grunt their way through meetings if they were forced to go and meet the clients. But then this small software organization introduced this method of collaboration, and everything changed. Over the course of a relatively short period of weeks, the two sides, the sales and the technical people, started talking to each other. They started sitting near each other. They started having conversations without being told to talk to each other. They even became friends. And again, they became more than the sum of their parts. What happened as a result of that, or at least the boss says it's a result of that, is that they saw off their competition. They had 3 or 4 competitors worldwide who did pretty much the same thing. Now they have none. So the world's their oyster. They can sell their software to pretty much all their target market with all sorts of useful advantages. So that was one success story in that book. Another compelling success story was the one from Liverpool John Moores University, where they did quite a large change project using this approach to collaboration. The output of that was that gradually over the course of 3 years, different groups of students began to collaborate more effectively with their own tutor groups and with their tutors and with each other across the year group. The final result of that was that one tutor group, 9 people, they all, every single one of them, got the very top class of degree. They all got first-class degrees. Now that's completely unheard of. I know in a lot of systems it would be impossible because there'd be regulations about how many people could get it. But in this case, they all made the grade and they all got firsts. Their tutor, as a result of the work that she did with them, has just been awarded her PhD, specifically in the research about how this was done. So this has been properly academically validated, and it all stacks up. It's all there in the annals of the university. But the main thing is that these students are now out there with their collaboration skills, taking it to their students, because most of them are destined to become sports teachers of one kind or another. And they're taking these ideas to their students, and to their students, and to their students. So when you hear stories like this, or when I heard stories like this, I'm going, yes. And as soon as I realized that this was based on skills that I already had, and they're actually skills that probably you already have. The fact you're listening to this means you're probably already quite skilled in some of these things. Hopefully you're going to catch it, grab it, and run with it. It seems to make that kind of difference to people when they get it. Now, I'm going to put Ian on the spot here because he's played with some of this stuff. What's your opinion?
Yeah, I think it's very much that. It's very catchable and grabbable, really, Judy. I think having spent a few weeks with this, I think I think there are a few key features. One of which is it's something which is immediately implementable. So what comes from Caitlin's book, and then what you kind of the little bits that you've kind of codified from that and run with that is, I think our experience from the course was very much that you could go away, do very practical exercises back in the workplace or your family or wherever you were happening to kind of want to see more collaboration, and you could work on things, elements like feedback and setting goals, and there were pieces there which were immediately tangible. There wasn't a particularly steep learning curve, and as you say, I think anybody who has a background in clean, NLP, associated areas like that will find this very, very intuitive. It's very accessible. I think the other interesting thing for me about it was that I got quite a lot of personal insight when we started to work and started to explore with this. And as part of the process, we started to share and unpack our own kind of metaphors and our own ways of working. It made me realize when I started to talk about what great work and great collaboration for me was, I realized actually some of the things I was doing at the moment were miles away from it. So it was actually quite personally insightful as well. It wasn't just about my interaction with the other people within the group. I also learned quite a lot about myself, really, through going through the questions and through the interactions with the other people. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that you can unpack quite quickly, both for yourself and for the in terms of whatever you're looking for in the world of kind of collaboration.
Thank you. And yes, of course, whenever you collaborate, you learn. You can't not learn when you collaborate. It's one of the most brilliant things about it. And of course, that's sometimes massively challenging. Certainly, when I went to Caitlin ran her first official training in how to facilitate this stuff, and that was 2 blocks of 3 days, and we went up to the Wirral in northwest England, where Caitlin lives, and those 3 days were some of the most intense personal development and professional development I've ever done, because working closely with other people pushes your buttons. It needs to. If we're all just sitting around drinking tea and only working at a very superficial level, we're not getting the most from each other. Or that's so it seems to me. Go on.
Yeah, what I'm going to add to that is that this very definitely and very gently. I mean, there's a kind of sort of loose structure to how this works, but very quickly you'll find yourself getting into much sort of deeper levels of conversation, and so it's a little bit like peeling the onion, really. The way that people often show up at work it's very role based, it's very persona based. And very quickly we get past that, and we start to understand how respectively each other work. And one of the fascinating things, having been through a group with this, you suddenly see how differently we all work. And of course, we all look at things through our own lenses and our own perspectives, and we make sometimes that inherent assumption that we all learn the same way, my way. But of course, it's not the way at all. And those differences are really striking, and yeah, that's one of the best parts of going through this experience, and you get into that ground quite quickly.
Which brings us to the first of the 3 mistakes, really, which is effectively believing that we're all the same. Most of us have been brought up on the golden rule: do as you would be done by. Do unto others as you would have done unto you, that kind of thing, and that's fine as far as it goes, but it's not it. That, you know, it's not actually true. As my husband likes to give as an example, what if you were working with a sadist? And the sadist would like you to beat him up or whatever, would like you to nail his parts to the wall. If he was to do to you what he wants done to him, you would find it violently unpleasant. The truth is that we are all different, all massively different. And once you start to explore who people really are, you discover how different. And when you can appreciate those differences, then you release a whole load of trapped energy. The example I've got in mind, I was working with a team at a large business information organisation in the City of London. Small team, just 4 people. And we were talking about when they're working at their best, what are they like? And because I'm a massive enthusiast for metaphor, and because I believe that metaphor tells stories about people that otherwise doesn't get told, of course I invite them to come up with metaphors for how they are when they're working at their best. One of the guys there said, well, when I'm working at my best, I'm like a train. I'm like a train. I get straight to the point. I go there quickly. There's nothing diverts me. and we asked a bit more about his train, and it was a steam train, and it was a beautiful steam train. It was like the Orient Express or something like that. So we discovered more about this train. So whereas the first assumption had been rather mechanistic, very one way, very directive, gradually the team started to discover that there was more to this guy than just running on rails, that actually things like the beauty of the train were important, and that kind of thing. And then another member of the team said that she was like a dancer, and it was all about the way the group moved together, and she could do solos and she could interact with the other dancers in the team. And the other two people looked at these two guys, the train person and the dancer person, and suddenly it became clear why they hadn't been getting on so well. Because for the dancer, the fact that the train was running on rails was exactly why she was finding it difficult. And for the train person, he could see that the dancer was doing something very different to him. But when this became clear to everybody in the group, they could not only see why it had been difficult, they could see how it could be different, how something different could happen, because there was common ground. The beauty and the elegance, and there was movement. It was movement of different kinds, but there was common ground. And over the course of the two sessions we did a few weeks apart, and following up afterwards, these two people became much more effective as team members working together. They found ways of working that actually functioned, rather than looking at each other baffled and not knowing what to say. And in fact, bitching about each other behind each other's backs. Instead, they could go, oh, right, I can see now he's doing his train thing, she's doing her dancer thing, we can see how that works, and we can work with it. Not even work round it, but work with it. We can see where a train is needed in our organisation, we can see where a dancer is needed. We can play to different people's strengths. I fear I've gone off on one, but does that making sense?
That makes great sense, Judy. And I think just to bring it back to kind of like the collaboration mistakes we make, I think when we're talking about kind of not really understanding people, most people, particularly in business situations, I think are almost like unconsciously incompetent around this space. It's something which possibly hasn't even occurred to them. And I was thinking back earlier today to a project I was on, an IT project, where we went through meeting after meeting, where essentially people came to each meeting and played the same scripted role, and there was no means within the room, nor indeed was there any real appetite to kind of change that. And so we just ended up getting the same frustrating kind of lack of progress and outcomes. And it's because people not only do they play the same role themselves, their perceptions of other people and their awareness of how other people can be different is often kind of like just not there at all. And yet, the moment that you start to open this up and you start to have the discussion about what's going on in the room, and you start to explore the process and how the collaboration is actually happening, change can happen really quickly. It's just that I think this is almost like a switch that needs to be flicked. People need to be woken up. And until that happens, there's just so much. I mean, I look at this particularly through a business perspective, but you can apply this to any dimensions of life, anywhere where you're having kind of relationships with people. There's just so much waste, and I think that's kind of one of the reasons really why this is such an exciting area, because it has that ability to quickly get past those issues and start to kind of get people into a much more productive type of conversation.
It's interesting, isn't it? It is just a flick of a switch to help people to get this, to appreciate the different people are different, and at the same time it takes a little bit to get to a place where the switch can be flicked. It's not enough usually just to tell people that everyone's different.
No, actually, that's quite dangerous. I mean, that's letting the genie out of the bottle almost too soon, really. And it's kind of the sort of thing you might see if you teach people feedback skills without having any kind of any empathy in the room in the first place. There's definitely an art and an order to doing this. There's definitely a kind of like contracting conversational piece up front, just to help kind of understand really why we're here, because the idea for a lot of people of talking about the process and talking about how and why we work together rather than jumping straight into the content is a bit of a misnomer to some people. It's a complete blind spot. There are those people for whom they see they kind of see life through that kind of process prism, but there are a lot of other people for whom it's just not something which is on their radar. And so it's important, I think, in the first instance, to get everyone onto the same page so they're appreciative of why they're in this type of conversation. So you're right, you can't just jump in. There's definitely an order and a sort of art to this.
Mm-hmm. And that, again, neatly brings me to the second big mistake that bright people make when it comes to collaboration. Because for me, the first piece, the piece that fits in before flicking the switch, is listening. Most of us don't listen. And everybody thinks they're a good listener. One of the things that I find quite remarkable is to realize that if you were not a good listener, how would you know?
Yeah, it wouldn't be immediately apparent, would it? This is, and I think the kind of personal development industry has done some interesting and not necessarily wholly useful things in this space. There are people for whom they think that kind of like the classic issue is people who just listen to respond, who are not necessarily tuned into what's going on around. But there are various forms of what we might call active listening, which I don't think, again, are really kind of they're not truly sitting in the space, holding the space with somebody, and just basically listening and allowing them, giving them a space to talk. That kind of high quality listening is a very, very rare commodity, and it engenders a great connection. And a lot of the things that we're doing in this space point towards doing that. And it's a great first point, because immediately, the moment that someone feels listened to, there is kind of like a sense of a much better felt connection. It might not be something that's easy to articulate, but people notice it and pick up on it because it's so rare, and that's really useful foundational stuff in terms of building collaboration and getting people to sort of start opening up a little bit more, as we were talking earlier about that onion metaphor, and dropping a little bit of their persona because they're feeling a bit more listened to, really, and they're prepared to share a bit more, because it's such a rare thing, Judy.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference to people when they're listened to. And one of the things that people do in their scripted roles in meetings is just do the broken record thing. They just keep saying their same thing over and over and over and over and over again, because nobody ever acknowledges them. Nobody ever appears to listen to them. And the examples around this are really very scary. The research shows, for example, that doctors, I mean, the only source of information they've got about their patient is their patient. And yet, doctors, well, how soon in the average consultation, how many seconds before the doctor interrupts the patient?
Oh, I'm I'm afraid I probably read this. It's something scary, like about 20 seconds, isn't it?
It's something scary, like about 18 seconds.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I thought you knew this one, but and it is terrifying. 18 seconds.
Yeah.
They're straight in there with an interruption. And how on earth are they going to know? How is the patient going to feel heard? When, for most people, going to the doctors is quite a high-stress occupation. You don't do it feeling, you don't do it when you're feeling well and fully equipped and on the ball. You go there when you're feeling sick. And yet you're not even allowed to get one sentence out before being interrupted. And doctors are just one example. We're all time poor. We're all short of moments in our lives. But actually, if we spent a little less time talking over each other and a little bit more time listening, we'd actually get a lot more done. And some of my favourite examples of how effective listening has produced results come from my time working at teletext. The favourite one being one of my roles there was there were a team of journalists whose job it was to answer the phone to the viewers, no matter what kind of call it was. It was always answered by a journalist because we didn't know when it might be a big story breaking. And on this particular day, I was there answering the phone from the viewers, and it was a Good Friday, a good few years ago, and that was the day of the Northern Ireland Peace Agreement. They'd just come out of Stormont Castle, waving pieces of paper and saying, "We have a deal. We're going to put it to the country, or put it to the province." And in those days, we had a phone poll that would always go up on the service, and we knew that the phone poll had to be, "Do you back the Northern Ireland Agreement?" And we'd written it, we'd put it on the page, "Do you back the Northern Ireland Agreement, yes or no?" Well, the phone rang, and a viewer phoned in and said, "You know that phone poll that you're just writing? I've got a suggestion. I'm going to suggest you call it the Good Friday Agreement." And he was, of course, absolutely right. And because in those days teletext was in every newspaper office in the country, by the time we went with it, everybody else could go with it. And the rest is history. So I think that guy's name was Mr. Trainer. He would never give his name, but I think he did twice in the time I was there, and I think his name is Mr. Trainer, so well done to Mr. Trainer in Lisbon. But, mostly when these people just ring up for a rant, you could just as easily not listen as listen. Often it would just be somebody holding forth about the news. But actually you need to listen. Sometimes people have got the answer. There were other times when viewers phoned in with a nugget of information that helped us to solve a mystery. I remember one at the Birmingham Mail where there were multiple editions of the Birmingham Mail, and different pages came from different parts of the region. And we had one amusing situation where in the early edition of the paper, 2 different regional pages went into the same paper. And thus on page 3, we had missing 80-year-old, probably he's very short on memory, probably doesn't know who he is. On page 7, we had found 80-year-old, has no idea who he is.
Oh dear.
I mean, it didn't take a genius to ring in and say, "Do you know?" But you would get those kind of things. People putting mysteries together, putting 2 and 2 together, people would understand how somebody's observation would make the difference. And when you listen, you discover that.
I found, Judy, again just bringing it back to a corporate environment, that some of the I mentioned ineffective meetings earlier. I was on another project with the BBC a few years ago, and the mix of characters we had was such that there was just They were incredibly kind of like creative, expressive people who just did not listen to each other. And the only time I had with them during the week was fairly short. They were quite senior people. And I ran this highly ineffective meeting for an hour. In the end, I kind of canned the meeting, and I ran the project by walking them and doorstepping them at their desks, and essentially sitting down and having one-to-one conversations, asking them high-quality, kind of cleanish questions, and just sitting and listening to them. And we had to do the rest of it via email, because it was just, you have to recognize sometimes, I think, where people are and aren't listening, and where you've got the right mix of people. Of course, at the time, had I known, we would have done some collaboration skills work with them, and that might have helped solve the problem. But I think where it's not working, you have to recognize the importance of not only listening, but also creating the right environment and asking the right questions to help people. Because some people either can't get a word in edgeways, or some people just aren't listening full stop, and they're just on transmit mode. And when you're in that situation, you've got to find ways around it. It's a very, very common mistake. That particular organisation's great at it.
Intelligent people who are often experts in their own subject area.
Yeah.
They are often busy giving their expertise, like I'm trying to do in this call. You know, I feel like, oh, let me just pour all this information into everybody's heads, and they feel that if they don't say what they've got to say, it will be lost forever. And yet, actually, if they were able to back off and listen more deeply, they'd have more information, more grist to their mill. They'd be solving the right problem, not the wrong one. Go on.
Yeah, no, it's very much the case that often their ladder's propped up against the wrong wall, and they're just kind of like, they're busy trying to do something, and they haven't. It comes back in the corporate context, the question of, usually with meetings, is why are we here? And listening skills are kind of like just something which make a huge difference. If you've got clear purpose around why you're meeting, that's great. But then for the interactions to be effective, you've got to be listening. If you're not listening, essentially, you may as well just send an email or push a piece of paper or report around the place. So no, it's crucial. It's difficult to imagine any organisation where acquiring these types of skills wouldn't be useful. There's always things we can do. And as I say, as we said at the outset, high quality listening where people genuinely hold the space is like gold dust. It's a complete rarity. And when you deliver it for people, they really notice. They shut up, and it really makes a big difference.
Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking, if there were one thing that anybody listening to this call could do differently, which would transform their collaboration skills, listening probably is one of those critical pieces. And one of the ways to get yourself to listen is to use something like a clean language question. Now, a clean language question is a question that always has to include some of the other person's words, or one of the other person's words. So there are a specific set of these questions. You can look at them online on my website. But the one I'm going to suggest is to ask, what kind of X? So anytime you think you've been told something and you already think you've got it really clear in your head what this other person has said, force yourself to ask that question. What kind of X? Because when you do that, you'll not only you'll force yourself to listen, and you'll grab an extra piece of understanding how their thinking is different to your thinking. Ian, you want to say something?
I just want to say, as a second part to that, once you've asked that great question, Judy, which is then just sit and listen, and listen with absolutely nothing on your mind. Just see what comes out and hold the space for the other person. Just give them your undivided attention and just see what shows up. You'll whatever you're going to do next will come to you. Don't worry about that. Just sit and listen and give them your 100% undivided attention. Because when you're putting those two things together, you're asking great questions, and then you're really holding attention and space for them. For me, that's when the magic really starts to happen.
I wholeheartedly agree. And of course, this whole listening thing is not an accident. And it's not that people are bad people that means they're not listening. Allegedly, we think much more quickly than we speak. I mean, it's obvious that we think more quickly than we speak. So and when somebody else is speaking, you're thinking more quickly than they are speaking. So inevitably, you've got more available thoughts, which could potentially go into the mixture. But it's that rapid thinking that needs to be suspended for effective listening. Turn that down, and then you actually start to hear what's happening. Now, I need to move briskly to the third of our three mistakes, because this was the one which, for me, was the big dough moment. And for me, listening has been, I call myself an X-ray listener. Listening has been meat and drink to me all my career as a journalist and as a trainer and facilitator. Listening is absolutely core to what I do. And understanding other people, knowing they're different to me, yes, do that because journalists do. We dig down and we find out about other people. That's what we do. But what I'd missed was that for really effective collaboration, another chunk is speaking up, is saying what I believe, giving my opinion, saying what I want, and giving solid, effective, actionable feedback to other people in that collaboration. Because without those things, I'm not really part of it. I'm not playing my full role. For me, every collaboration has a shared goal and individual goals. But if I'm not being honest and upfront about my goals, how can I expect anyone else to help me achieve them? It's not going to happen. And if I'm not giving feedback, and indeed receiving feedback, how can I get that collaboration to happen more and more effectively? Now, the feedback one is not a trivial thing. So one of the big excitements for me in Caitlin's work was discovering a way of giving and receiving feedback which dramatically turned down the emotional level. And for me, I don't know about anyone else, but for me, giving feedback was always a big drama. It was always hard. And receiving feedback was almost worse. If somebody was saying something nice, I'd be embarrassed. If somebody was giving me constructive feedback, I'd be mortified. Neither of those states are particularly good for the listening skills. They're not good for building strong relationships. So what if there were a way of giving and receiving feedback which took away the fireworks and made it possible to give and receive feedback with a reasonable level of emotional equanimity? And that, for me, is another of the big mistakes that bright people make. They often keep silent. They survive on their expertise, but they don't show up as themselves. They're not. They don't say who they really are, and they don't share their objectives and what they actually think at a human level. Maybe at a technical level they certainly do, but at a human level they probably don't. And I think that's a profound mistake, and one that I see all the time in organisational settings.
Yeah, it's interesting, Judy, that some of this is about, I think, as you say, it's about the ability to have a common language. Feedback is a prime example. The model that Caitlin developed, it gives you essentially a pair of stabilizers to be able to go in and as you say, deliver powerful constructive feedback without necessarily falling foul of kind of like being too emotive or too difficult. So that's one example, and I think there are others about the importance of creating common language that can be done here. The other for me actually in this area is about timing. I've seen projects where people kind of like the classic trap people fall into is they wait until the post-implementation review at the end, and then they unpack a whole load of stuff that would have been useful. But because they have no means of being able to say and share this stuff with potentially more senior people, it goes unsaid. And then we get to the end of the project has invariably underperformed in some way, and then they're given the floor, they're given an opportunity to talk, and they'll then unpack it all. And of course, it's all in the wrong order. If you'd spent some time at the start of the project doing kind of like collaboration type skills and providing people with the ability to do this, it would have been far more useful, rather than waiting until we get right to the end and then saying it's almost like getting to the end of the quiz show and pulling back the curtain and saying, look what you could have won here. So timing is everything with this, and actually investing some time up front, helping people to speak up and providing them with that common language and the means to do that is definitely a key factor, and something which is a classic mistake in many organizations.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Now, we could tell loads of stories at this point, but I'm conscious we said we'd go for about an hour.
Yeah.
And I want to end by offering people an opportunity to explore this in more depth. Perhaps inevitably. I mean, we couldn't cover the detail of how this is done in this call. It would have been impossible. It's such a massive subject and so exciting. But as I said at the beginning, I think Ian put his finger on it. It's a switch that can be flicked. It doesn't take a lot to flick that switch, but it does need to be flicked, and then all sorts of stuff happens. If you would like to get more into the depths of this, I would be delighted if you would like to join a program with me. There are a couple of options that you might like to take up. The most immediate is that if you would like to do this for yourself, so if you as an individual would like to improve your own collaboration skills, there's an opportunity to do that very soon, and you can do it from the comfort of your own internet connection. Starting at the end of October, I'm going to be running a 6-week program of collaboration skills. It's 90 minutes once a week for 6 weeks on a Monday evening UK time. There's just going to be a small group of us, 6 people, and you get to work directly with me and with that group and really start to develop your own skills in the way that you want them to be developed. It's a small enough group that we can respond to any individual requirements and that kind of thing as we go along. So if you would like to join that class, the details, I'm going to see if I can put them on the screen. Now that would be clever, wouldn't it, if I could do that. Here we go. Oh, that's not quite what I intended. Hang on a tick. So the URL is there, and hopefully you can read it. It's xraylistening.com/store/collaboration school. Starts on the 27th of October, and the video tutorial groups are at 7:30 UK time. Before I go on to the next bit, Ian, you've been through that. Any quick comments on that program?
Yes. I've mentioned a few things about it through the call today, but one thing I would say is it's a unique kind of like, I call it almost like a sandbox experience. you get to play with others, you get to bring whatever content you want to bring to the groups, and that can vary from week to week. You can play with this, and so what you're able to do is actually play with these tools without having the added pressure of being in with an existing bunch of colleagues or an existing kind of like existing sort of situation or problem that needs to be fixed. So in that sense, it's a real luxury. And I think the other thing about this is it's inherently participative. Because you're all coming from it individually, it's if you're gonna get involved, it is really key to come with thoughts, ideas, and to kind of like fully participate, because that's essentially where all the learning is. But it's a great experience, and we did cover off a lot of ground in the 6 weeks. We were able to go through all the feedback elements that we touched on earlier, and there's several other kind of models that really, when you bring it all together, just put you essentially in a great place then to go back to whatever context you want to use this in.
Thank you very much for that. And yes, I really enjoy presenting these programs. I've just finished one earlier on this evening, and the change in the 6 participants in the course of just six calls is quite astonishing. You know how much people can change in that amount of time when they throw themselves into it and actively participate. The other piece to mention is, if you are more interested in pursuing this on behalf of your organization or on behalf of your project team, or some kind of situation like that where you've got a small group of people who are already working together, including if you work together from remote locations, then I would love to run one of these projects just for your group. You'll get even more from it because you'll be working with your real stuff on the ground. So you'll already be talking to the people who you'll be learning with, and that gives you a whole layer of extra learning and knowledge from that. So if you are interested in introducing this to your project team or your small group or your organization, do get in touch with me, and I'd be delighted to talk you through how that might work. It's something we could do very, very quickly. So let's make it happen. And with that, I think we better bring the call to an end. Thank you very much indeed for listening. It's been brilliant to have you all with us on the call. Thank you very much indeed to Ian, who's been brilliant at contributing so many useful examples and stories and suggestions around the whole thing. I couldn't have done it without you. And,
that's all right. It's been great fun. Thanks very much, Judy.
And thank you to the technology for working, or so it seems. And if you've been listening to this and you have feedback for me, do please let me know what you think. Would you like it to have been different? Would you like it to be different next time? Is there a subject that you would like us to cover next time, if there is a next time? Drop me an email, send me a message on the website, and we'll do our best to help. And with that, thank you very much, and good night.
Cheers. Good night, Judy.